At Enbridge, we monitor our pipelines around the clock, using trained operators and computer monitoring systems. Because for us, safety isn't just a job. It's a 24/7 commitment.
Distinguished guests, welcome to the Detroit Regional Chamber's 2025 State of the Region, presented by Citizens. Please welcome the Michigan Regional President of Citizens, Yasmin Jaycee.
Thank you. Good morning, and welcome to the 2025 State of the Region. Citizens has been fortunate to be able to partner with the Regional Chamber to produce this data-rich report for many, many years. And I personally am thrilled to be here with all of you today to discuss the findings. But before I go any further, I want to thank Sandy and the entire team at the Regional Chamber for working tirelessly to produce this report and to host this event annually. Thank you, Sandy, for letting Citizens make a small part in this important work. Please join me in giving them a round of applause. And as I do every year, because I think it's equally important, I want to thank each and every one of you here in the audience today. Thank you for being here today and supporting the economic health of Greater Detroit. Please give yourselves a round of applause. The Greater Detroit economy was strong last year. The labor market was solid, and robust consumer spending continued to fuel GDP growth. The region and the state also continue to provide a supportive business environment. In fact, Michigan's new business applications in 2024 were 28% higher than pre-COVID numbers in 2019. And I'm proud to say that Michigan holds the #1 spot ranked for business-funded R&D and next-generation mobility in investments among all states. So it's clear the entrepreneurial spirit of the region and state is alive and well. But there are some challenges. The market environment remains uncertain as businesses navigate changing federal policies. This includes tariffs, which have added a degree of caution to the outlook. Inflation also remains a concern for individuals and businesses. And unfortunately, the Detroit region lags peers in key metrics such as educational attainment, growth in population, and jobs. But let's not despair, because that's where all of us come in. As business leaders, it is incumbent upon all of us to guide the region towards a better, brighter economic future. In fact, at Citizens, like all of you, we take that responsibility very seriously. Our experienced bankers have served businesses and individuals here in Detroit for many years, and so we are deeply committed to this region. And we stand ready to help navigate uncertainty and the changing circumstances. Whether our clients are looking to buy a home, grow a business, start a business, or build generational wealth, I'm proud to say Citizens offers solutions to help them succeed at every step of their financial journey, regardless of what might come. And to my Citizens colleagues who are here with me today, I am incredibly proud of you. There is no other team that I would rather navigate the future with. Thank you for your continued commitment to our customers here in Detroit. Now, as a financial institution, we really do believe that we are uniquely positioned to convene industry and community leaders to catalyze positive change. We can do this together. And we actually all know that for businesses and the economy to thrive, our communities must thrive. Together, I believe that we can address all the headwinds that come our way and position our community for a better future. That's why Citizens is so proud to partner with local organizations like the Great Lakes Women's Business Council Accounting Aid Society, Greening of Detroit, and Junior Achievement. We do this to help support workforce development and financial empowerment programming to create greater economic opportunity for our neighbors. It's also why I'm excited to be here with all of you today to review our progress and to discuss tomorrow's challenges. This is how we persevere. And I get it. There is a degree of uncertainty in the current economic environment, but there's also plenty of reasons to be optimistic about the future. At Citizens, we look forward to partnering with each and every one of you to ensure the best possible tomorrow for Greater Detroit. Once again, I would like to thank Sandy, the entire team at the Detroit Regional Chamber, all of you in attendance here today for your support to help continue to allow our community to thrive. I hope you all enjoy the program. Thank you.
Please welcome the former governor of the state of Michigan and former U.S. ambassador to Canada, James Blanchard.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Jasmine, thank you for your leadership and sponsorship. Sandy, thank you for inviting me to share my very strong views about why Canada is our best friend and ally in this country. I'm joined by, yes, you can. I'm joined by Janet, who's been part of this journey with Canada. How many of you are following March Madness still? All right. I know, unfortunately, we won't have Michigan State or Michigan, but they had good runs. What's interesting is, as you may know, it was a Canadian, James Naismith, who invented the game of basketball. Right, he did it in Springfield, Massachusetts, but he was really from Ontario. So the Canadians like to brag about that. Colin is here, the Consul General. He will confirm. It's just one of many thousands of connections we've had with Canada for decades and decades, really for 200 years, and going on more. But you know, I was interested in the other day. I thought if I had gone to sleep on New Year's Eve and woke up yesterday, Sandy, and somebody told me that Canada had been labeled our enemy, that Russia is our friend, that Ukraine invaded Russia, and that we're going to annex Greenland, I would have said, April Fools. Only it's not a fool. Canada has been our best friend and ally and partner for 2 centuries. Most Americans know that. As a matter of fact, probably 90% of Americans believe Canada is our best friend and ally and partner. And I'm here to, you can clap. I'm really here to underscore that. How many of you have friends and relatives in Canada? Look at that. One thing I want you to do when we finish this program today or tomorrow is call them up. Tell them how much we value your friendship. You'll be surprised how important that will be to them, how helpful that will be, and how relieved they will be that people like you and me understand the relationship and appreciate it. It's really, really important. You know, over the last 50 years, I had the opportunity to be a United States Congressman from Oakland and Macomb County, Governor of Michigan, Ambassador to Canada. These are fabulous opportunities and challenges in public service. We enjoyed it all. But I will tell you, all those 50 years I worked closely with Canada, with prime ministers, with members of parliament, with premiers of the different provinces. And being ambassador to Canada is a fascinating blend of politics, diplomacy, business, government. It's really a great combination. It was a good use of my background as a member of Congress and governor. And let's just talk about a few facts about Canada. We were allies in World War I and World War II, allies in Korea and Afghanistan. We were founders with Canada of the United Nations, NATO, and partners in NORAD. We've had an integrated economy on autos, energy, agriculture, national security for years and years and years. We have cooperated on everything from Great Lakes water quality to the space station. I recall, as governor, we had regular meetings with the Canadian premiers, and they continue to work. Ontario and Quebec are often part of our Great Lakes Governors Association. Massachusetts deals and New England deals with the Atlantic Canada. And the West Coast, it's Oregon and California dealing with British Columbia. It's a close, close relationship. And there's no good reason for our government at any level to label Canada as a national security threat or a trade partner villain, or to suggest that Canada become the 51st state. That is a supreme insult. So all the discussion of tariffs is one thing, but the constant insults coming from the White House and advisors who I think ill-advised our president is really a bunch of nonsense. And tragically, and this is the fact that you need to understand, which is why I want you to call your friends, relatives, and neighbors in Canada. Today, relations with Canada are the worst we've had in modern history. And this is all created in Washington, D.C., not in Detroit, no, not in San Francisco, not in Nashville, not in Tampa, in Washington, D.C. You know the connections here. We're kind of the cradle of cooperation. Detroit, Windsor, Michigan, Ontario. We're the cradle of cooperation. The White House has indicated, I want to look carefully here, that migration and fentanyl are the basis for tariffs and their accusations. But there's no truth to it. It's not even relevant. There are more migrants going north, in fact, probably more now than ever, than coming south. That fentanyl from Canada is less than 1%. I mean, it's crazy to suggest this. And it's crazy for people in power, including the vice president, to say, we've been treated very badly by the Canadians. I have no idea what he's talking about. By the way, we sell more products to Canada than any other country in the world. The United States has a manufacturing surplus with Canada. Let me read it. We have a manufacturing surplus, trade surplus with Canada. We have an auto trade surplus with Canada. We have a merchandise trade surplus with Canada. We have a services trade surplus with Canada. We do have an energy deficit in oil, gas, and hydro, and we want that. Michigan uses that. We need that. On any given day, natural gas, which heats the homes and businesses in this town, is probably natural gas from Canada, either shipped directly or back from Ontario. By the way, on energy, the United States has been self-sufficient on energy since President Obama's first term. So by the way, we're doing record drilling now, so don't believe anyone that we have an energy crisis in the United States. By the way, 8 million jobs depend on trade with Canada. 36 states have Canada as their largest export market. Oh, and by the way, Canada has a huge amount of rare earth minerals. We've even had conferences on that in Washington, D.C. So why are we talking about extorting rare earth minerals from Ukraine or trying to gobble them up from Greenland? We already know we have a supply with our best friend and neighbor to the north. Now let me just get to tariffs. I'm going to check the time here because I'm supposed to talk for no more than 10 minutes. I'm looking at a clock, but I don't see one. Oh, you're in trouble. I don't see one. Tariffs, look, it's like a sales tax. It's going to raise the cost of living here. It's starting probably with, not just with auto cars, but with food, gasoline. I mean, 25% tariffs on everything with Canada would raise prices of cars, sure. We already have steel tariffs. As I recall, it's a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum. The last time that happened, General Motors had spent $1 billion more on those metals. Ford Motors, $750,000 more. Talk about raising prices. I mean, car prices are going to go up. Sales are going to go down. Layoffs and job losses are a near certainty. And the price of cars could go maybe up to $10,000. I don't really know. We're going to have a discussion on that. I don't really know that. We don't know for sure. I do know that Jim Farley, the distinguished, talented CEO of Ford Motors, said these tariffs will blow a hole in our economy, the likes of which we haven't seen or never seen. So it's a situation where many economists are predicting a recession. I hate to do that. I don't want to stand here and make news by saying that because I'm not an economist and I'm not an astrologist. All I know is Liberation Day could become Inflation Day if we don't watch it. And that's serious. It's serious on our people, our consumers, our economy, our businesses, and it's totally unnecessary. By the way, when the US auto industry ran into trouble in 2008 and 2009, the financial crisis, triggered initially by banking, but other things, the Obama-Biden administration came to the rescue of General Motors and Chrysler, and it worked. What you don't know is the Canadian federal government and the Ontario government also pitched in with several $1 billion of support. People forget that here. By the way, that's not surprising. When 9/11 happened, my friend, our ambassador to NATO, got a call, the first call. Nick Burns is his name. He just finished as ambassador to China. He was at NATO at the time. After 9/11, the very first call he received at NATO was from the Canadian ambassador saying, "What can we do to help?" So it's not surprising. As I speak, there are about 1,000 Americans in Colorado Springs inside a mountain monitoring the skies all over the world as part of NORAD. Oh, and by the way, there are 350 Canadians there as well, working side by side to protect the security of our country and the free world. Now this fall, good news here, we're going to dedicate the new Gordie Howe International Bridge. By the way, it was the Canadians who came up with the name. It's the most important infrastructure project in North America. It's going to be a beautiful 6-lane bridge with plenty of room for cars and bicycles and people, and we continue our exchange back and forth with our friends. It's a time then in the fall where we can once again celebrate this marvelous partnership and friendship with Canada, a partnership that works, a partnership that we value, a partnership that means so much to all of us in Michigan, in Detroit, and around the United States. And so let's celebrate that as we move forward, and let's make sure no one distorts the truth about how fabulous this relationship is. Thank you.
Please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Detroit Regional Chamber, Sandy Baruah.
I do own other clothes. I'm just saying. I did not mean to wear the same thing. Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 11th Annual State of the Region by the Detroit Regional Chamber. What better way to kick off this event, not just this event, frankly, but the moment of time that we're in with an address, a fabulous address by our former congressman, our former governor, our former ambassador, Jim Blanchard. Governor, thank you so much. That was absolutely perfect. And Janet, thank you for being Jim's adult supervision for all this time, and thank you for being here today. So more thanks. First of all, I have to thank our incredibly generous and wonderful longtime sponsors. First of all, Citizens Bank. Thank you to the Citizens Bank team for being with us for so many years. Yasmin, JC, thank you for your opening remarks. Great job, really appreciate it. Our regional stakeholder sponsor is our longtime friends, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. Our regional leader sponsors are the Detroit People Mover, Enbridge Energy, Farbman Group, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and Verizon. Please, a round of applause. And my thanks to those of you who sponsored tables that you brought your teams at. Flagstar Bank, Independent Bank, the Smart System, and Visit Detroit. Thank you all. And perhaps my biggest thanks, and I do want to acknowledge and recognize, will the board members of the Detroit Regional Chamber please stand up? Thank you for your incredible volunteer service, and everyone be nice to them. Performance evaluation time is just around the corner, so please buy them a drink on their way out. One of the many things that I am so incredibly proud of the Detroit Regional Chamber team is our incredible focus on research and data. We try very hard to be data-driven in all that we do. And many of you who have been coming to this event know that it's not just the State of the Region report that we do. We have multiple data platforms that are available to you, to your businesses, to whatever entity you run to allow you to make better decisions. We have a polling relationship with the Glenn Gariff Group where we do multiple statewide polls every year. We have a long-term relationship with the Gallup organization, also focused on polling, especially around the lives of Detroiters and those in the Tri-County area. At your table, you will see another annual report that we do, which is the State of Education and Talent, which oddly enough is focused on education and talent issues. Our Mich Auto team does an annual report, Michigan is Automobility, which is a deep dive data report into the state of next generation mobility and automotive in the state of Michigan. We run the Detroit Regional Data Center where you can go online, or more importantly, someone who works for you can go online to this site and create your own customized report and frankly, brand it with your logo on it. And also, this brand, State of the Region, is now a quarterly economic report, which we're going to make available on our website. So lots and lots of data available to you all to use in addition to what we use. So the panel is back. I am so delighted that I'm going to be joined in panel discussion after the data report, certainly by Governor Blanchard. I'm so pleased that our friend Colin, the Consul General of Canada, will be joining our discussion. The senior counsel at Warner, Norcross, and Judd, Aida Dismondy, did I get that right? No, I did not. Who is an international trade expert, will be joining us. And moderating our program, I couldn't be more delighted that our friend, my friend, the fabulous journalist, author, musician, Devin Scillian, will be moderating the panel. Devin, thank you so much for coming back for this. You know, Devin, ever since you left the anchor desk, I've been forced to get my news from The Daily Show. You know, before we jump into the data, I just want to recognize, something really fantastic that's going on here. This region has always been a leader in innovation. There's a reason why the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office opened its first office outside of Washington, D.C., right here in Detroit. It's because the amount of innovation, the amount of patents that this region files. But for all of our great innovation and patent powerhouse, all of our innovation, for the most part, has been within the great companies that reside in this area. About 13 Fortune 500 companies just in this broader region alone. But what's happening now with things like the advent of Michigan Central Station, the new University of Michigan Innovation Center, what Dan Gilbert wants to do on the Gratiot site around healthcare innovation and health technology, along with all of the other terrific assets that we have, like TechTown at Wayne State and the Karmanos Cancer Research Center, what Bob Riney and the Henry Ford Health team are doing on Grand Boulevard with Michigan State University. These are all new, plus our existing innovation, open innovation assets, really have the potential to accelerate this region's regional innovation economy and give us a whole new gear as we accelerate into the 21st century. Another exciting thing is that we have 3 relatively new presidents in our major universities, our R1 universities, Kimberly Espy and Kevin Gustowitz and Santa Ono. And the three of them not only have developed a fantastic relationship, they all have deep backgrounds and expertise in innovation and in entrepreneurship, and they are all committed to work together, and they are working very closely together to really drive this next generation innovation economy, not just for the region, but for the broader state of Michigan. And the Detroit Regional Chamber wants to congratulate our friends at Michigan Tech, who just made R1 status earlier this year. That's 4 R1 universities in the state of Michigan, and nothing says how much we are an education powerhouse in having 4 R1 universities in a state our size. And this innovation corridor, we really need to focus on this Ann Arbor to Detroit, and then eventually Ann Arbor to Detroit to Windsor to Toronto, broader innovation network. This is what they do in the Bay Area. This is what's happening and has happened in Austin. We can do the same thing, but we can do it binationally. And I'm really pleased that with Santa Ono's leadership and with the support from the Chamber and his partnership with Wayne State University and Michigan State University, we are well on our way to start the outline of this innovation corridor under the umbrella of the work that Business Leaders for Michigan is doing at the statewide level to develop an innovation strategy for the state of Michigan. All of these things are hugely important as we move forward. So the the State of the Region report that you have in front of you obviously is chock full of data, and frankly the slides I'm about to show you are chock full of data, but I'm only going to show you a fraction of them. And to give this conversation just a little bit of shape, we've created 4 buckets for this presentation. So our first bucket, we're going to focus on growth that we can celebrate, things that we can get really excited about and have good reason for because of the data. Comparisons of concern. This is the bucket of data where we might look good in isolation, but when you put it in a national context or compare it to our national peers, the story starts to fall apart a little bit. We want to focus on inflation. We know that this has been a major issue over the last 2.5 years in this country. We want to talk about the impact of inflation. And then we want to talk about how things are changing quickly, because we all know the federal policy environment is anything but certain. But let's start off with the incredible things that are happening here. Is there ever been a better time to be a Detroiter? I mean, everything from how well our sports teams are doing, the fact that Michelin now has a Detroit guide, to the celebrity-filled opening of Michigan Central Station, the NFL draft. It has been such an exciting time to be here. We have so much to be proud of, and we see that in a lot of the data. Just look at gross domestic product. We have had strong economic growth all throughout 2024. And this is an area where we have essentially kept pace and in some cases exceeded the growth of the United States. And anytime we can have data points that show that we're doing better than the US average, as we did in the middle of 2024, this is good news. And so this is something that we should celebrate. Employment, perhaps maybe the most important thing. Do people have jobs? We can also celebrate this. There's been strong employment growth across the country, 11% over the last 4 years. This region has matched that. That is tremendously good news. Home prices, for those of us who are homeowners, it's kind of yippee season, right? The Detroit region's average home prices have grown 8% in the last year. And that's only compared to 5% across the nation. We are outstripping the nation in home prices. Not only are we outstripping the nation, we're one of the fastest growing home price markets in the country. Commercial real estate, we all talk about, return to office and empty office buildings. We have less of a problem in that than the rest of the country on average. When you look at industrial real estate, we have a 4% vacancy rate, where the nation has a 7% vacancy rate. Commercial office space, we have a 14% we have a 12% rate compared to the national 14% rate. These are good numbers and certainly better than our national peers. Venture capital, and I wish Chris Rizek were here from Renaissance Capital, but he has really led the way in planting a flag and making Michigan an attractive place for venture capital. We have grown 48% in the last 5 years in venture capital activity, whereas the country has grown at only 36%. This is terrific news. And over the last 2 years, there's actually been a dip in venture capital activity. That's because there's a lot of reasons for that. But nationwide, it's down 12%. We are essentially held steady at just negative 1%. Again, really good numbers. So let's shift to areas that we are concerned about, where we have good numbers, but they're perhaps not good enough. So last year, about this time, the Governor's Population Commission dropped its report, and it was an excellent report, co-chaired by 2 friends of ours, Shirley Stancato and Ambassador John Ricolta. And it highlighted what we need to be doing to grow our population. And this chart tells you exactly why. We are 15th out of 20 when it comes to population growth compared to our 20 largest metro peer regions in the country. When you look at our 1% growth over the last decade, it certainly pales in comparison to places like Austin and Nashville and Dallas. Let's take the comparisons just a little bit further. GDP growth, we're 17th out of 20. Job growth, we're 14th out of 20. Income growth, we're 17th out of 20, and in educational attainment, we're 18th out of 20. If there is a slide in this presentation that makes all of us, as business leaders, as community leaders, as education leaders, take note of the work that we have in front of us, this is that slide. Now, unemployment. It's long been true that Michigan and the Detroit region's unemployment rate always resides above the national rate. Well, that certainly was true at the advent of COVID in the spring of 2020. In fact, our unemployment rate in the early spring actually jumped up to 14% higher, but the annualized number is about 11%. Again, above the national average. But there was good news. As the economy accelerated and people had money to spend throughout kind of the COVID time, starting in late 2020, early 21, our unemployment rate essentially reached national levels. That was a really great sign. We're starting to see that diverge again just a little bit. If you look on the left-hand side of this chart, and this information is updated as of Friday, so it's late-breaking news. The United States' unemployment rate is 4.1. Our region's unemployment rate is now over a point higher than that at 5.2. So we're starting to see that diverge again, and there's that old saying that when the United States catches a cold, Michigan gets the flu. Let's hope this is not the beginning of that particular trend. Now, I have long celebrated since 2021 the explosion in new business applications in the state of Michigan. There's nothing that can predict future economic growth than the filing of new business applications. One of the reasons why we had such a slow recovery, the nation had such a slow recovery coming out of the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, is that this dynamic didn't occur. We usually get this incredible explosion of new business starts, new business applications during economic turmoil. We didn't get that in 2008, 2009, and the years to follow, thus the very sluggish recovery out of the Great Recession. When COVID hit, we saw an explosion of new business applications. Hugely, hugely positive news. The problem is as impressive as our numbers are, the nation as a whole is still doing just a little bit better. And if we want to start this trend of us outstripping the nation in economic growth, we need to outstrip the nation on new business starts and new business applications. So we all know that the job market is cooling. We have seen this trend over time, but it's cooling faster here. In other words, it's a little bit chillier here than it is in the rest of the country on average. If you look at the lower left-hand side, the nation as a whole has, over the last 5 years, they're down 12% in job openings. We're down a third. So the job market's still good, but it's not great. In fact, this shows you that the job market is good, but not great here in our corner of the world. Before the pandemic started, there was 1.6 job openings for every unemployed person in the metro area. At the height of the red-hot job market coming out of COVID, it was more than 2 jobs available for every unemployed person in the region. Now, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So that still indicates a healthy job market. It's just not as red hot as it was. So shifting to inflation. Now, it's taken a while, but economists, people like me, people who have been, frankly, doing a better job of looking at the data than we were at understanding the people, we would look at things over the last 2.5 years and say, well, let's see, inflation is cooling, spending remains super strong, incomes are rising, but through all this, we couldn't understand why consumers were so cranky. And certainly we saw that in the 2024 election. Now the data is painting the clearer picture that the people were right and the people like me were wrong. So let's set the stage, let's rewind the tape and look at where inflation has been. So inflation peaked in the spring of 2022 in this region at just about 10%. Now it has dropped precipitously, and we ended the year 2024 at 3%. Now 3% is not the Fed's target of 2%, but it's a really solid number. But the problem is that people want prices to go down. And there's a problem with that, because that's called disinflation. And while high prices, prolonged high prices, are painful, they're a problem, about the only thing worse is disinflation. And if you want further proof of that, talk to any Japanese policymaker or economist, because the nation of Japan has struggled with their economy. One of the primary reasons is disinflation that they have suffered through for 30 years plus. But the impact of higher prices and the inflation that has been built up, pent up over the last 2.5 years is real. The average price of a car is up $10,000. That's almost 30%. But perhaps more importantly is people's grocery store bills. Over the last 5 years, a bag of beer, butter, bread, and bananas and other things is up almost 40%. That's a lot. And it explains why people are cranky. Household incomes, well, in real dollars, it's down $3,000 compared to prior to the pandemic. That's $3,000 in real dollars that households have less to spend on, well, beer, banana, bread, and butter. That's a problem. Now, an interesting fact, look at the lower left-hand corner again. The lowest paid workers in our economy, the lowest 10 percentile, actually got the biggest income boost throughout the pandemic. Now, let's face it, it's easier to move numbers when you're at $12 an hour or $17 an hour. It's easy to make big swings there. But they got the biggest percentage gain in their incomes than any other income group in the country. The other fact that I want to make sure that we recognize, moving to the main part of the graph on the right, is that the United States' average household income is almost $78,000. In this region, we're only at $72,500. So the average Detroit metro family makes notably less dollars than their national counterparts, and we have $3,000 less to spend. Personal savings rate, again, this is another area where we saw some really interesting data. If you go back to the early 2000s or the mid 2000s, I mean, that's really rewinding the tape. Our savings rate, our personal savings rate was essentially just above 0%. It recovered in the years leading up to the pandemic. In the pandemic, it spiked 15%. Obviously, people had no place to go. There was a lot of federal money coming. They were saving a lot of money because they had no place to go. But now, we are now back lower than we were prior to the pandemic in the savings rate. People are spending through whatever savings they accumulated during the pandemic. So, finally, final section. Want to remind everyone that all the data in this report is rear view mirror looking. And past performance certainly does not guarantee future performance. And this is what I want to focus on over the next handful of slides. We are starting to see the early signs of potentially a notable shift in the positive trajectory that we saw coming through 2024. We don't know if these are blips. We don't know if this is a trend. We don't know if this is just kind of the churn and turmoil of maybe some short-term uncertainty coming out of Washington. We don't know. But if you look at the lower blue line on this graph, this is the famous University of Michigan consumer sentiment number, has dropped dramatically, circled in orange there, from January to just a week and a half ago. This is one of the biggest drops that we've seen, and it is rivaling the drop that we saw in the early days into the pandemic. Consumer spending, as I said, we have been on this upward trend regardless of what was happening in the economy. COVID restrictions lifting, federal policy, dumping money on businesses and individuals, federal money going away. Throughout all that, consumer spending kept rising, kept rising, kept rising. But now, just since the beginning of the year, you can see this line either start to flatten or potentially be going down. We don't know, but this is something certainly worth watching. CEO confidence. I don't have to tell you that this is a really dramatic drop. This is a drop, the big drop that you see here on this chart, that's just from January. So in just, literally 2 or 3 months, we have seen one of the biggest drops in nationwide CEO confidence we've ever seen. And Michigan is at a disproportionate risk with some of the changes that we are seeing potentially at the federal level. Everything from changes in EV policy, electrification, infrastructure, and certainly tariffs. And why is that? Well, as the governor clearly said, we're an automotive state. Our supply chains are completely integrated. There is no other state in the nation that has a more integrated supply chain than with the nation of Canada than Michigan, particularly around automotive and manufacturing. Energy, Governor Blanchard mentioned this as well, too. We get a lot of our energy. In fact, Michigan gets a big chunk of its energy from our friends in Canada. Our agriculture industry. Michigan's top agricultural export destination is Canada. We are huge, and we are a very large agricultural state. And of course, just proximity. Governor Blanchard talked about the deep personal and social ties we have across the border. But more importantly, it's an economic relationship too. Think of all the Canadians who work here and all the Americans that work there. Think of the 6,000 plus medical professionals that come from Ontario to work in Michigan hospitals caring for us and our families. This is a very tight relationship. And 1 in 8 Detroit region workers are tied to our economic relationship with Canada. And there's about 650 Canadian companies that have major footprints in the state of Michigan. And fortunately, through our statewide polling with the Glenn Gariff Group, we know that Michiganders understand this. They understand the close relationship. Almost 70% in our last poll, which dropped in February, not that long ago, said that Canada is an economic friend of Michigan. And a majority understand that tariffs on Canadian goods will hurt Michigan's economy. And we certainly couldn't agree more. So, that is the thumbnail summary. We have growth that we can celebrate. There are areas of concern when you compare us with our national peers. The impact of inflation is very real, and Michigan is at a disproportionate risk with some of the federal policies that are being considered right now as we speak. Thank you, and I look forward to our panel discussion.
Joining Sandy on stage, please welcome back James Blanchard. And please welcome the Consul General of Canada in Detroit, Colin Bird. Senior Counsel at Warner, Norcross, and Judd, Aida Dismondy. And to moderate the discussion, please welcome journalist and author, Devin Scillian.
Thanks very much. Yes, I left television news 3 months ago. Did I miss anything?
We miss you.
Daily Show.
Thank you. The Daily Show. Daily Show. Usually when we have this conversation, I start by letting everybody weigh in on the report that we just heard from the region. But I know you're all champing at the bit to really move to tariffs and the trade war, and I'm hesitant to try to even keep you in the barn for even just a moment. So knowing, though, that today is a complicated time to try and even talk about this, I don't even know if we would be much better served by having this conversation on Thursday, because as we've seen, this has changed by the hour. We know how Governor Blanchard feels about the tariffs. I want to let everybody else kind of give me your thumbnail thoughts so far. And I think it's only fair, Colin, to start with the Consul General for Canada. Well, give me your thoughts on where we are.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm afraid Governor Blanchard has stolen all my best lines. He's also almost made me cry, but I've held it together. These are just naturally moist eyes. Because you understand this relationship, and you have been leading here in Michigan to leverage the connection that we have with across this border to help Michigan's prosperity. And, you know, there were a lot of numbers thrown out. And we are in a period of yo-yo tariff policy, which in itself is incredibly disruptive for folks who are having to manage across the border. But one number that wasn't up there that I still think is safe from Jim is 70%, which is the amount of inputs, of exports from Canada into the United States that are inputs into further manufacturing in the United States. And that's about the inverse of what you have with most of your other industrialized trading partners. And what that speaks to is what we do in this region of highly integrated trade. And that's why you see on the slides that you've just witnessed a story about a disproportionate impact, and really this region and Michigan in particular being at the epicenter of the risk. And that's what makes it really valuable for me as a Canadian diplomat here in Michigan to know that this is not a Michigan policy. This is a made in Washington problem, and we need to be working together across this border to protect this region together.
Aida, give me your thoughts.
I couldn't agree more with Colin. What it is that I have said also to my clients, your best ally right now are your suppliers. In a time when the federal government has let us down from a trade policy perspective, it is this time when, going back to Governor's remarks, not only to just call our friends, but our business partners and come together as a united front, because it is through business partners that we will continue these relationships at the time when chaos and insecurity or uncertainty is looming large.
Yeah. And Sandy, I'm holding here a copy of a letter that was sent to, well, the White House, the Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Commerce, from you and Glenn Stevens at Machado, urging a pause, if nothing else, but a reconsideration of this policy. You want to expand on the letter?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to congratulate my friend and colleague, Glenn. He's done an amazing job, really, in the national media, taking the lead for the Chamber and Machado, really highlighting what I talked about, that Michigan's economy, Michigan's industries are at a disproportionate risk with the policies that are being considered here. We don't understand what the end game is here. Just to be completely, I'll put on my old political hat for a minute. So when I talk to people who are close to the president, people who are in the administration, Republican members of Congress, et cetera, and they kind of give us the talking points. They say, well, there's going to be short-term pain, and but it's, but we're going to bring manufacturing back here. And say, okay, tell me how that's going to happen in a political cycle, because best case scenario, it takes 3-4 years to build an automotive plant. It takes about that same amount of time if you're lucky to build an aluminum plant, right? So how does, frankly, the Trump administration, from a political standpoint, right, withstand the unemployment that's going to happen, the slowdown in the economy? Potentially we could have another era of stagflation, where we have rising prices because of tariffs, but high unemployment because of the slowing of the industries. So that's the point that we tried to make to the two secretaries and the ambassador, the USTR head, trying to say, hey, this is going to have long-term pain. We didn't make the point that I don't think you can handle that.
I thought it was really interesting. It was reported 2 days ago that Stellantis is going to reopen the Belvedere Jeep plant in Illinois. Now, this is a plant that already exists, is built and there, and it's going to take 2 years to get it up and running again. I think there's a broad misunderstanding of how the auto industry sometimes works. Governor Blanchard, though, I look around on the panel here trying to find someone to advocate for the tariffs, and I'm a little lost. So let me just try a little devil's advocate here, though. The White House position is that we're simply matching tariff for tariff. Tariffs already exist against the United States. Shouldn't they be an even playing field? Shouldn't we match like for like? If there's a tariff on something going out, there should be a tariff on something coming in. It would just match the Canadian tariffs, and not just Canadian, but those from other countries.
Well, that sounds logical, but I think what's happened here is our leaders in Washington have created an imaginary universe, kind of an alternate universe, and wanting people to believe it. They feel if they state something long enough, people will believe it. But I don't know, with Canada, for example, they didn't have tariffs on steel and aluminum, for example, which raised, as I mentioned the last time, $1 billion in costs for General Motors and $750 million for Ford. So the facts are simply not there. one of the advisors to, and I think the president's getting bad advice, and I'm not even sure he's engaged as he pretends to be, but he's getting bad advice. One of his top advisors, who, by the way, recently came out from prison, all right, another felon in the administration, has advocated that if we raise tariffs enough, somehow we can cut the income tax. But he's trying to tell the president and others that tariffs are paid by other countries, not by we, consumers.
Yep.
And so that's simply wrong. So it's hard to argue with something that's so illogical and make-believe. I'm saying that this rift with Canada, which is in Canada, is viewed as far more than that, supreme insult, is made up. The president is trying to slay imaginary dragons that don't exist. By the way, the leader of Citizens Bank, Yasmin, is from London, Ontario. And I'm sure she must agree.
Aida, though, to the point that the United States isn't inventing tariffs. They do exist.
Sure.
Lots of countries impose tariffs on goods.
We use them all the time. They're selective. You use them selectively. Where another country has a totally unfair, irrational tariff on us, so we'll respond. Or if they're dumping, if they're selling products here that they don't sell, they sell them here cheaper than they do in their country. Yeah, we can use. They're selective. Joe Biden used them. All of our presidents use them.
Yes.
Canada uses them, but not widespread, and not in a way that somehow you're going to create an imaginary pot of money so that you can cut taxes for some people but not others. It's just, but I'm going to let the trade expert here respond to
Well, I was going to say,
right?
Aida, I think that you believe that by the kind of trade war and the tariffs that we are trying to levy now, we are actually lessening the impact that we actually need to have. For instance, a group of countries united against, say, IP theft in China, where tariffs would be valuable and important and impactful.
So let me clarify first. You're putting me in a difficult position as far as playing the devil's advocate when I don't want to advocate for it. So
that's why I'm here.
I had to make that disclaimer. So for all of you that are listening, understand my position. But let's look at it as we all know, tariffs have always been around. When there are a risk to a country's economy or a country's industry sector, countries have always had these protectionist agendas for when it comes to goods that are coming into their countries. However, not to this extent. Not to the extent where the entire trade policy or the way how we do business with the world is being shaken to the core, be that for our adversaries and especially for our trading partners and our allies. Because I'm not sure about you, but even in the day-to-day relationships, I'm not sure how one can stay friend by making one a foe. And that is what is happening currently with the trade policy that we are following. To create a balance in trade by not investing in the economy, it's preposterous.
Yeah, just
I agree with Governor Blanchard, who said that. So Governor Blanchard said very well that you are the president is being ill-advised. I'm not sure, often when I read the news, as many of you are here, I'm not sure who is actually advising the president. Forget about his presence, whether he knows how these implications well work or not, but it is the advisors to the president that carry the responsibility for making the agenda in the way that it is right now.
Mm. And remember, when he started out, the man in the White House said, we're levying tariffs on Canada because of the influx of fentanyl and migrants, which is, by the way, non-existent.
It's an excuse.
44 pounds.
It's an excuse.
Colin, jump in.
Yeah, so let's just say from the get-go that when the president raised fentanyl and the scourge it is hitting both of our countries, Canada's all in. And we've been all in with the last administration, we were all in on this administration. A lot of that work has to be beyond the border, so around money laundering, around keeping the 97% of the precursors that are coming into our continent from China out of our system. We're all in. It is a pretext when it comes to tariffs because it was the necessary legal basis in order to be able to evade US obligations under our trade agreement. That's why the two conversations have merged. But when it comes to sort of a strict conversation on fentanyl, it is a scourge for both of us, and we are happy to be working together. Similarly on border security, right? So we have worked with the last administration on expanding the Safe Third Country Agreement, changing migration policy. We have a border that works, and we need to keep it that way. So we're all in on that. The proof is that 160-acre facility being built in Detroit, totally financed by the Canadian government, totally built by the Canadian government. It's going to be the crown jewel for Customs and Border Protection in the United States to protect the border. This is a long-standing commitment because it's in our interests as Canada to have that border be secure.
Yeah. And I'll join those who, I love that it's the Gordie Howe Bridge and not the Duracell Snapple.com, whatever. But this is an interesting time of vulnerability for this to happen to Canada. Commentators in Canada have pointed out that Donald Trump has managed to do what nobody in Canada was able to do, which is unite the 5 Canadian political parties. But you're in the middle, and I would not dare to ask you to weigh in what's going to happen politically in Canada, but you're in the middle of a shakeup in the Canadian government, and does that create vulnerability right now for how Canada should or shouldn't respond?
Well, your first point was there, and I'm certainly not going to weigh into that.
Of
beyond
course.
my remit.
Sure.
But the reality is that this has really forced Canada to look at internal barriers to trade that we should have been dealing with a long time ago. And this has brought a consensus to the Canadian establishment. You know, we can gain 4 percentage points of GDP by reducing those barriers internally. We're looking at a 2.5% hit to GDP from the tariffs. So it is spurring us to think. It's spurring us to have conversations with other trading partners.
Yeah.
As the rest of the world is expecting to be next in this cycle, how do we reimagine some trading arrangements that, frankly, we have not put enough effort into because this has been such an easy, effective relationship that we've had with the United States. Yeah. So it's forcing us to be more creative, and it's uniting Canadians in a way that I've never seen and makes me proud as a Canadian.
That's something, isn't it? Sandy, it was estimated by Peter Navarro over the weekend that this could be a $700 billion a year influx of money, their way of thinking for the U.S. government, $100 billion of which would come from the auto sector. So to kind of jump on your metaphor from a while ago and to paraphrase Coleman Young, the rest of the country gets a cold, we get pneumonia on this. But that's not to say there's not a constituency in Michigan for what's about to happen. The United Auto Workers talk about creating unusual bedfellows. The United Auto Workers like this idea.
Well, so let's be super candid here. The UAW, their business model is to drive more membership within the UAW. Their business model is not about broader economic growth or employment growth. It's more membership into the UAW. I don't fault them for that. It just is what it is. So let's put that $750 billion number in context. It won't cost the auto industry $750 billion. It'll cost us as consumers $750 billion. So, and this is something the governor and I have talked about. What I don't understand the logic of saying that, okay, what we want to do as the administration, which is noble, is to extend the 2017 tax cuts. Okay, we support that, we get that. But in order to do those tax cuts or extend those tax cuts and do additional tax cuts, we need to raise taxes over here, right? Because tariffs are taxes. So I don't understand how the tax cut or tax cuts are beneficial if we're creating a whole new set of taxes over here. So again, I don't see the end game. I don't see the political path forward on this. So yeah, it could be $750 billion, but also if you raise, okay, so depending on what kind of vehicle it is, and where it's built, where the parts are, and what its price point are, if the manufacturers don't eat any of the costs, and let's face it, the auto companies have relatively small margins to begin with, an imported high-end car, like say a Mercedes S-Class or something like that, that price could go up by about $12,000. It's an imported car, high-content car, very expensive car.
Yep.
Something a little bit more, that us mere mortals could afford, could go up $3,000 to $4,000. So what are those price increases going to do? It's going to suppress demand. So the number of cars that we sell now is not going to be the number of cars we sell tomorrow. In fact, just in the last 3 months, Cox Automotive has downgraded the US automotive sales number twice already. I think they're down about 600,000 vehicles from where they started the year.
Yeah. Governor, I want to stay with the UAW for just a second because of the long-standing alliance I think the Democrats have felt with union workers. What are your thoughts on the UAW's support of this?
Well, let me say first that I have a 50-year relationship, 60 actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a UAW appointee on the Chrysler board after they came out of bankruptcy, the Obama program. So I'm grateful for that. And Sean Fain, I think, is a very effective UAW leader for his members. And I'm pleased that he's generally a Democrat and supports people like Alyssa Slotkin and Gary Peters. But I think...
Well, he notably supported Kamala Harris rather than Donald Trump, and now they find themselves aligned.
I think he's hoping that the promises of the president will be realized sooner than later. And I'm worried they won't at all because they're based on imaginary scenarios. But it's hard to fault a leader of a group to want more members. But I would remind everyone again that, first of all, this integrated economy has been a blessing. Our auto industry wanted integration when they created the Auto Pact with Canada. They were already making cars in Canada anyway, and they were making them here. They had actually...
Remind me how you felt about the original Canadian-Mexican, when NAFTA, because it was ratified, I believe, just after you left office.
My job was to get it done in Canada. It was not to get it done in Mexico.
Right.
we got it done. And I don't think you could name a single plant in Michigan that closed because of something that went on in Canada at all. We've had an integrated economy with them since 1965. In fact, originally the United Auto Workers were the same union in Canada as here. Now they're separate, so maybe the politics is a little different. But I think the integrated economy with Canada is a blessing, has been a blessing, is a blessing, should continue, probably should be strengthened. But I'm not going to fault Sean Fain for wanting to think that some plants will close and they will open up. By the way, if that does happen, it'll be two presidents from now probably who will be continually apologizing for the way we treated Canada during this era of our politics. So I'm just... I want to look at the bright side of things, which is why I want to see how we strengthen relations with Canada. It starts with all of us.
Aida, our conversations before this, in fact, I think you were making the point that whatever administration follows this, let's not start with the third Trump administration.
No, please don't.
That's a whole other conversation. But you believe that it's going to take 4 to 8 years to unravel and disentangle where we are?
Well, if not more. And why do I say that? Earlier, it was said that it takes about 3 to 4 years to build a plant. Right now, what we have created is a complete uncertainty and reliability into the U.S., how U.S. does trade or does business with the world. we are damaging our relationship with our trading partners. The next administration that will come in will have to do damage control. The administration after that will have to wait for that impact of damage control to happen so that we can see progress happening and the relationships being stabilized in a way that perhaps we can have, all of us in the world can have some certainty by the way how we do business. But we are shaking at the core all of our relationships, especially, and I cannot stress this enough, with our allies and our trading partners. So
Who are our allies at the moment? I'm not sure anybody would pee on us if we were on fire.
So that's a very good point. That is a very good point. Canada being one, our first ally, right, to just start there, our neighbor across the border. Let's separate a little bit the policy that the administration is following from the policy that we as a nation, as a country, the majority of us have as a people, going back to the people. Our allies have always been the US, the EU, besides Canada, Mexico has tagged along, and other countries around the world. Do we want to enforce that? I mentioned earlier, are we making fuss out of our allies and wanting these alliances to continue? So from a people-to-people relation, we continue to have those strong relations nonetheless. From a trade policy, administrative relations, I am not sure right now who our allies are, because sometimes I look at, Governor Blanchard said it very well, are we in bed with Russia or not? That's a question to be considered. It is a very important question to be considered, and I'm making a political statement, but let's not forget that, because when we're talking about the geopolitics of how the world works, on the one hand, from a press release perspective, we are saying, okay, we are going to continue with the sanctions on Russia. We're going to also have secondary tariffs on Russia for countries that are buying oil from Russia. So in essence, we're making them a foe. But we're making them a foe, right? But on the other hand, from the way how we treated Zelensky when he was at the White House, the conversation seems quite differently. On the other hand, we also have China, don't forget it. China is a military and economic power, one which we're trying to maintain the competitive advantage in a way that perhaps we haven't done so. That is recognized not just by this administration, not just by the Biden administration, not just by Trump 1.0 administration, but also by Obama. It's actually started with Obama-Biden administration, the risk that China presents. So we're keeping the foes, but where our alliances are at this point, I do not know.
Governor, you want to say?
I wanted to mention, I've got to know General Mattis. He was the Secretary of Defense for Donald Trump. He's a career Marine general, 4-star, brilliant, a scholar as well as a battlefield commander. And he gives a standard speech and he says, the most important thing, there are 3 issues that are really important in our national security here in America. Allies, allies, and allies. And so it's not just Canada that's been alienated by the insults of, you're just an appendage of us and we need nothing from you, the daily insults. It's also Western Europe and Europe generally. These are our allies. When they see how we treat Canada, they say, my God, if they're treating Canada like this, their best friend and neighbor and partner, what are we going to get? And of course, they're organizing now to figure out how to do an end run on us, as they should. They are allies. I'm probably the oldest person in this room. And I remember in grade school reading on the Junior Scholastic, the creation of NATO. And I must tell you what a sense of security it gave me during the Cold War. Really. I grew up with the architecture laid in place by Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, and Dwight D. Eisenhower. They created a structure of security, military, economic, We decided to rebuild Europe. By the way, in doing that, they were buying our products and goods. We were getting ahead. They were getting ahead. I feel like I'm part of a blessed generation. Not only did my forefathers win 2 world wars, they created a structure to give us peace and prosperity. And anyone who wants to put that asunder is wrong, wrong, wrong. And that's my message, because most of you didn't grow up like this. We take this for granted, our security, our economy. We take our relationship with Canada for granted. This is just as things are not, things are not preordained. It is not written in the stars that we're always going to be successful like we've been. We're not going to be successful unless we face reality and we work hard as citizens of Michigan, the United States, and the world. And that's the message we need to make. Can't help myself.
Can I make a point about China? Not a point in Chinese, but about China. Building on Aida's point.
If you can make a point in Chinese, I will be really impressed.
For the first time. The point that Aida made, I think, is incredibly important. China is not just the United States' greatest security threat, economic and trade threat. China is the Western world's greatest threat from a security standpoint, from an economic standpoint. Every country plays perhaps maybe a little bit unfair from time to time. China does it at a wholesale level. The only way for the Western world, the industrialized world, whatever you want to say, the partners that Aida mentioned, the North American alliance, EU, Asia Pacific, right? The only way, given China's, frankly, very strong competitive advantages, to combat the Chinese economic and national security threats is to do it together. And I'll take that. And for someone who's worked in Washington and national policy for a bulk of my career, it's the end game I don't get, right? How do going to war, either verbal war or perhaps actual war, who knows with this guy, I don't understand the strategy if our biggest threat is China and we're focused on, beating up our friends.
It's the lost opportunities, right, that we really have to be worried about here. Last year, both Canada and the United States put the 100% duties on Chinese EVs.
Yeah.
We put the same tariffs. Canada's not against tariffs when it's dealing with unfair trade. Let's be absolutely clear on that. And we put them on China last year. We have been working since the last Trump administration, with the Trump administration,